Welcome back to UnCeiling You. In Season 3, we're focusing on building strong inner foundations, connecting authentically, and also taking bold action in community. And today's conversation delivers on all three. Here are the 3 promises for this episode. You're going to learn how to reframe introversion, not as a limitation, but as a powerful strength. You'll walk away with practical strategies to contribute, connect, and network in ways that feel aligned and not exhausting. And you're going to discover how to step into a new identity, shifting from a quiet achiever to what my guest calls a quiet warrior. I'm thrilled to welcome Serena Lowe, a trauma-informed coach for introverts, host of the Quiet Warrior podcast, and someone who has lived the introverted journey herself. Serena helps quiet achievers grow into quiet warriors and achieve professional visibility without having to fake being extroverted. And if you're ready to take this conversation even deeper, we're extending it inside the UnCeiling zone. That's where you'll find reflections, handouts, insider circle questions in a space to practice these strategies with others who are also unsealing themselves. So be sure to join us there after the episode. Okay, so Serena, I am so happy to have you here today. I feel like you're going to be such a great guest because many of the folks in the audience are introverts, just like you are. And so I really wanted to have your expertise out there for the UnCeiling You audience, the people that are making a ripple effect just like you are. You're making huge ripple effects out there. And so I appreciate you being on. And you've said that introversion is not a limitation, it's a way of being. But for many, it still feels like a professional disadvantage. And so here's my question for you. How did you begin to reframe introversion from being something to overcome into a strength to be honored?
First of all, thank you, Natalie, for having me here today. I would say that my story is the same as many of the fellow introverts' stories who are in your audience today. And that is that for many years, I also thought there was something wrong with me, that because I'm a quieter person, my personality is softer. I could pick up the vibe, from the office, from the workplace, that somehow I'm not quite enough, not enough of a leader, a very good worker, a quiet achiever, but not enough to get up to the next level. And so it's taken me many years to figure out a new way of being that feels compatible and true to who I am, but at the same time allows me to present my strengths in a different light that is more attractive, more compelling, more impactful. And I would credit Susan Cain's book Quiet for a lot of the, kickstarting that process, because she has a very wise saying in her book that everyone shines in their own lighting, in the right lighting. And to me, that meant that if I am in an environment that is, in a sense, not putting me in the right lighting, then it is my responsibility to do something about it. I have tried advocating or speaking up a bit more or suggesting or bringing awareness. But sometimes, the systems take a long time to change because multiple people are involved and there are multiple layers of hierarchy. And so you're one person almost against the system and you're trying to change things from the inside. That's very difficult. I found that it was actually easier to change myself. And that is to bring a different kind of energy with me when I'm in the room. And so where other people are, for example, speaking very loudly, speaking very fast, the introvert's strength is actually leaning in and listening really intently. Now, that kind of deep listening is very rare because most people are in a hurry to get on with the agenda, to get on to the next topic and the next important thing. But when somebody is actually listening and paying full attention, you notice because when they decide to speak up a few moments later, it's almost like there is a collective jaw drop because what they say is so powerful and so accurate and so perceptive and articulated in a very unique way. And that is the introvert's strength, that ability to take it all in, process it, filter out the unnecessary, go in and be really precise and then articulate it in a new way that also takes into account everybody else's views and then offers something that's like a pathway forward. and done in a very elegant, respectful way. And I think that is something powerful and needed today.
I really can appreciate that. In the organization outside of the podcast that I work in, I really count on that deep listener to be thinking of the things that everybody else missed. Because if we don't see that thing that we're missing, then ultimately it's going to kick us in the rear because the project will fail. And so I really appreciate you bringing that out and helping people appreciate that from the inside, that they have that. So what was the first time, or what was the first time that you realized that showing up as yourself, as that deep thinker, could actually be more powerful than trying to be like that extroverted norm?
I would have to say it was probably in a meeting, a management meeting. And in the past, I would have been very on the edge of my seat, bracing myself because I was expecting something bad to happen. I was expecting to be put on the spot. And I don't do very well when I'm on the spot because it makes you feel unsafe. So, what I did in the moment was remembering that I'm responsible for the energy I bring to the room and reminding myself that I do have something constructive to say. And so, there is an element of preparation, mental preparation before the meeting. If you know what the agenda is, you can, prepare some bullet points. But more importantly, I think it was to trust that in the moment, when I could not predict what was going to be said next, that I would find the right words and the right moment to insert myself. And it was not about saying the most spectacular thing to capture attention. It was more about bringing the topic back to focus and bringing a solution forward, but also presenting it in a way that did not feel, look at me, I'm so clever. It was more, have we thought about this? Or so and so said this, and I agree with that. And I also think, and then putting in my own perspective. So I found that doing things like that, and that became a sort of modus operandi for me. When you recap, you demonstrate that you are listening. And when you put forward a view, but you do that in that discreet, gentle way that doesn't feel like it's demanding the spotlight, other people don't feel threatened. And so it's easier for you to speak up as well. And then the third thing, of course, is holding your own energy as you go into that interaction. Instead of bracing yourself and feeling like you're going to be attacked, you go in there calmly believing that you already know enough to be at that table, that you already have enough wisdom, enough lived experience, you've done the years of work, and you deserve to be there and to have your voice heard. And so it was not one meeting that it helped me see that for myself. It was the accumulation of many, many meetings and testing out many different strategies before I finally got to a place where it was easier for me to walk in and believe that I belonged there and that I have a right to speak. So a lot of it is not just the external, I think, for the introverted, quiet achiever. A lot of this work is done internally before you even step into a room. That conversation we have with ourselves and our self doubts, and what we decide to do about those self doubts as we enter that room.
I can imagine, after you doing all of that work and continually and persistent, on every meeting, summarizing what you've heard and have we thought about this and here's another solution, or I agree with somebody else. And you do that meeting after meeting after meeting. I would imagine that when you walk into the room and you walk into the room with the energy, that after a while, people are not going to feel like the meeting can end until you spoke.
That's a very kind and positive way of saying it. Yes, I think a skilled facilitator would make sure to include all voices and give someone who is quieter the opportunity to speak. The other thing is that the introverted quiet achiever doesn't always have to speak up in a meeting to make an impact because there are other ways to contribute as well. And sometimes, you can have a one-on-one follow-up after the meeting with someone who was in the meeting. You could speak to a mentor, an ally, a colleague, and sound out your views, or you could put something in an email to your supervisor if a thought comes to you as a result of what you heard in the meeting. And that is very helpful as well because we have a tendency to move on very quickly to the next thing. And introverts have that ability to reflect and to think deeply about things that have already happened and nobody else is thinking about them. But if something positive, something constructive, something very important comes to you, as a result of the last 50 minutes of the meeting, but they wasn't addressed then that's another opportunity for you to contribute.
Yes, I could see that. That's very helpful. Thank you for that. So you work with quiet achievers ready to identify their light and upgrade to step into visibility without pretending to be someone that they're not. What does that identity shift look like to you when you're working with someone in real life and for someone who's spent years staying quiet at work?
So there are lots of reasons why people stay quiet at work, and being an introvert is one of them. But another that I've encountered in recent years is the professional migrant woman. So she's in a new country, and because she doesn't speak the language as fluently as a native speaker does, she might be an extrovert in her own country and suddenly become an introvert in the new country. So because she's muting herself, she is toning it down, trying to achieve perhaps an accentless kind of English, for instance. She may have this idea that, my accent is my weakness, and therefore I need to present myself differently, or I need to get so good at English that people can't tell I'm not born here. And that can hold them back for a long time. And so with that, there is a different element, a different kind of psychology that's playing out. And that is the idea that I need to blend in, I need to be like other people in order to belong, to be accepted, especially in significant high stakes conversations. So the work there is also to address that identity shift that is required, that my accent is my superpower. It is not my weakness. And so, as long as I can communicate, as long as I can bring my ideas across and other people understand me, it's okay if my accent is different because that's what makes me unique. That's what makes me me. I'm bringing all of myself into this interaction. I'm bringing forth all my other skills. My accent is just one part of it. It's what makes me stand out. But there are other things that I'm bringing, other, the wisdom, the years of experience, the kinds of customers and clients I've worked with, the high profile projects I've done, and so on. And so reminding them that the accent is just a small part of it. There is so much more that they are bringing, so much more value. And then for the other kind of let's say a professional woman who is aiming for a leadership position, who perhaps is newly promoted and figuring out how to assert their authority. And for some, and because they are very used to being a team player, being the peacemaker, they find it difficult to have those conversations with, say, a team member who is perhaps not performing to expectations or has got a personality that's very different. And so there's a bit of a clash. But because the introvert tends to also be a people pleaser, that makes it very difficult for them to say, I don't think, that's a very good way to handle that situation. Let's have a conversation about it. Even that for them might feel like a step too far out of the comfort zone. So it's also building out their confidence in themselves first, internally, so that they can feel, I can walk into this kind of interaction and not feel that I am going to be threatened and therefore I have to brace myself and protect myself. And I don't have to feel like a villain because I'm going to say something that might upset this other person. And so it's finding that middle path. And that's why I like to call it the quiet warrior, the concept. And that's the name of my podcast as well, because that's the identity shift needed for that quiet achiever. The next level up for them is to be the quiet warrior. And that's someone who can lead, who can speak, who can take action in a decisive way when they need to, without feeling, oh, I have to fake extroversion in order to do it.
I see. Though that those are two very powerful internal narratives that have to be rewritten in order to show up for as a quiet warrior. Are there any other narratives that you'd like to point out?
I think there's another narrative that often plays out with introverts who have been through some kind of upbringing, childhood conditioning, childhood trauma, even, where they were constantly there was an authority figure, usually a parent, who had a way of communicating or attuning to them that made them feel that they were never enough, they were never good enough, that they had to perform in order to be loved, that they had to be perfect in order to be accepted and to belong. And so they take that, and sometimes it's not even conscious. A lot of this happens at the unconscious level. And the child who is perhaps a bit more sensitive to these sorts of vibes in the family takes on this belief from childhood, carries it into their 40s, 50s, even, continues to believe and act out in a way that reinforces that unless I perform, unless I'm perfect, unless I keep striving for that next level and keep getting promoted and keep achieving, I am not enough. And so it's very heartbreaking. But the moment they realize that that's where it's coming from, then they have the power to do something about it.
And then they become the quiet warrior.
Yes, if they choose to.
Yes. And so for these folks, sometimes networking can feel unnatural, and it can feel unnatural for introverts, especially those that feel that it's got to be performative. Like you have to be someone, perform, and be something that you're not. How do you help introverts network in a way that feels aligned and not exhausting?
Brilliant question, because that was me for many years. I almost wanted to avoid networking events entirely because, from my experience, they were just simply overwhelming for the senses. And I do know that a lot of fellow introverts are also highly sensitive people, and they get overwhelmed easily in loud places and where there's too many people, there's too much happening in the environment. And so there is that sense of I walk into this space and I'm completely enveloped by all this noise and I
Yeah.
have no clue, what's happening. What am I supposed to do next? Do I go talk to these people? How do I find the right moment to introduce myself? Or should I just stand here in the corner and just mind my drink and then go home? So there's a lot, it takes a lot for an introvert to show up to a traditional business networking kind of event. So in my introvert community, where I curate in person as well as hybrid events to promote social confidence, one of the things I encourage people to do is lower the bar for yourself. So instead of thinking that you have to work the room when you go to an event, just aim to speak to one or two people. You don't have to go around handing out business cards and doing that 30-second elevator pitch, because that kind of, trying to cover the ground as much as possible doesn't work for the introvert who craves depth and quality. So focus on the one or two, have some really good conversations, ask a lot of questions, demonstrate curiosity, be a great listener, which already the introvert is. So they feel like, oh, I'm just being myself. I don't have to pretend to be somebody else. I don't have to impress anyone. And the funny thing is, quite often when you are the listener, other people go away having a really great impression of you because not many people listen well. So when you're curious, genuinely, in a sincere way, and you ask questions that the other person can open up and talk about themselves easily, they think you're a wonderful conversationalist. And so that's one way to handle how the networking side of things. And the other is to notice your own energy. So I always tell them, you have a social battery. As an introvert, your battery goes down the more people you talk to. So keep an eye on your battery. So if at the 90-minute mark you feel that's it, I'm noticing, some red flags, I'm starting to feel really restless or uncomfortable here, then give yourself permission to stand up, go to the host and say, thank you for the event, but I have to go now, and just go. No need for long explanations. So we practice doing that socially inside the introvert community. And so it becomes easy for them to advocate for themselves instead of staying right to the end and then feeling put upon because they're so exhausted and they can't do anything for the rest of the day.
So those are wonderful strategies. And I love the fact that, you as an introvert, you can be yourself and get a lot out of the meeting as a result without draining your batteries if you use these strategies. Can you share a surprising mindset shift or strategy that helped a client move from dreading the network to embracing it, like a story around someone that used these strategies that you just described?
I could think of somebody who previously would have stood on a threshold and considered going home, even though they had driven 90 minutes across town just to attend that meeting because they had been told that you have to go to networking meetings, you have to put yourself out there, and the way to do it is to work the room and all the rest of it. And so they were the sort that needed to go to the bathroom to catch a breath, to just escape from that kind of scenario because it was too much for their senses. And so what they learned to do was to pause on the threshold. And actually, even before, what we did was to practice even before going to that event. And that is the preparatory work. So with the introvert, there's always three parts. The actual event itself is just one of the three. Before that is where the important work is done. So even before you go in, there are things you say to yourself, there are things you prepare yourself for, and there are intentions you set for yourself so that you know why you're going in, for what purpose, and what you want out of that event. And then when you're actually there, then you learn to amplify. And that's what they'd learned to do, to amplify their presence while they were in there, not by being loud, but by simply doing more of the things that came naturally. So they listened more, they asked more questions. Instead of speaking to one person, they decided they would speak to another person, so two persons. And then at the proper moment, they took themselves off and went home. And the important thing after that, of course, was also to block time out to recharge and to do nothing for a couple of hours, or maybe even for the rest of the day. And so having that kind of three-part framework enabled them to repeat that every time they needed to put themselves out there, go to a networking event. They knew what they could do incrementally, and they could see over time that they became braver and that it was easier for them to talk to people, and that they were actually enjoying it.
Hmm, very nice. So, how often um, do the quiet people miss out on opportunities, not because they're unqualified, but because they are under communicating? Like, if they didn't use these things, how often would you see that? And what are some signs someone might be under communicating their value at work or in business in these situations?
I would say in business, you can tell if someone is under communicating if they are the best kept secret in their business.
Mhm.
As in, those who actually know them personally would know that they do really good work, but to the rest of the world, they are like a mystery. And that's to do with the communication side of things, because quite often the introvert also holds back because part of it is due to, I don't think I'm that good. But there's also that element of, I don't want people to see me. And we call that the visibility dilemma. It's like they know they need to be out there because they have a business or they have a career that they want to advance. But at the same time, because by nature they don't like having the spotlight on them, they also avoid the spotlight. So they've created
Mhm.
this internal contradiction and they can't quite figure out what is the way to break through that. How do you be visible, but then also be comfortable with being visible? Because visibility comes at a cost. So for them, it has to be purposeful enough that it is worth it for them to put themselves out there. And usually, when we do some values work with them, we can tie that back to their highest values. So if there is something they care about a lot more than they care about their own, say, ego or how they appear, then that's the thing that they need to anchor themselves to. So for instance, if they have a very strong sense of freedom or justice, or they have a strong sense of compassion for other people or a particular group of people, then that is something they can hook themselves onto. So if it's for that group, if it's for someone else, if it's for a bigger cause, usually it's easier for the introvert to overcome that sense of reticence, to then
Mhm.
say, okay, because of this, I will take this opportunity. I will speak on this stage. I will step up into the spotlight because it's not for me. So the difficulty for them is usually when it's all about themselves, and because that's not how they work.
Can see that. And you say earlier how important introverts are, especially because of how much they listen and how much they see. And extroverts maybe just like going out there and not jumping before they look or leaping before they look. And yet introverts will take the time to really understand what's going on and help people make really good decisions. And so they can shake the world gently. And I love that. What's one moment where you saw someone shake the world gently, not by being loud, but by being deeply aligned and intentional, especially with their values?
I remember a client whose one of her values is authenticity, and she was having trouble showing all of that at work. But after we'd been working for some time together, she found the courage to take part in an event where she allowed someone else to step up and be the face of it, whereas she was contributing in a different way. And that was by being the supportive presence, by being the encourager, and by being the logistical person. So it used to be that when she did that, she did it from a place of, oh, it's because I'm not good enough to be in the spotlight. But this time it was because she recognized that this colleague was actually, that's their natural strength, that they really shine when they are in the spotlight. And her way of shining was actually to play that supportive role. And even though the dynamics were such that she was the leader, and so there was an expectation that she should be front and center, she didn't feel that need to be that. And she was entirely comfortable with cheering this other person on, giving them their moment in the spotlight, and enabling them to shine. So I think for her, the difference was being able to realize that peace for herself and be at peace inside herself, that she was not left out, she was not missing out, she was doing the thing that she's naturally gifted in doing, and that is in supporting.
I could see that. And so in some ways, she was also being a facilitator, I'm guessing.
Exactly. That was what she was very good at doing.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Now you help others uncover root beliefs. What's one belief you had to let go of for yourself in order to grow?
I had to let go of the belief that because I am quiet, I can't go far professionally, that I have to be loud in order to be effective as a
Hmm.
leader. And that is probably one of the biggest beliefs that once I was able to let go, I started to show up and shine as myself in my leadership and facilitating capacity so much more brightly and effortlessly.
I think that should be like a quote or somewhere. I think that's great that you uncovered that. Now, we are going to move to the Insider Circle questions. These are questions that the Spark members who are just starting to get familiar with the Unsealing You group get to listen to some questions that I have for you that are deeper than what we've already asked, and or the Unsealed group. And these are people that not only listen to what you have to say, but will have handouts for them to go deeper as well. But before we go into those questions, can you tell me, where could people who are struggling with getting to that next level and being introverted find you? I think that you're fantastic. I think that you deliver such great value, and you would be someone worth really seeking out.
Thank you for that. There are two places where people can connect with me best, and that is on LinkedIn, where I'm very active. And the other way is through my podcast, which is the Quiet Warrior podcast, because in there I also interview a lot of subject matter experts on all the different aspects and the myths and stereotypes to do with introversion. And we talk about constructive ways to reframe.
Okay, fantastic. And I will have links to both your LinkedIn and your podcast available in the notes. I really love having you on the Unsealing You podcast. I cannot thank you enough for being here today. Any final words for our audience?
I would say to the introverts and the quiet achievers who are listening to this, I encourage you to remember that you are already enough, that you have so many wonderful gifts, and the world will miss out if you don't share those gifts. So keep being yourself, keep being courageous, keep taking that tiny step forward to put yourself out there in the way that you know best, that is comfortable and safe for you, because the world needs your voice.
Very nice. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for joining me, Natalie Luke, and Serena Lowe today on the Unsealing You podcast. We promised you 3 things in this episode. First, that introversion isn't a limitation, but it's a real strength. Second, that you'd leave with practical strategies to show up, contribute, and connect without draining yourself. And third, you would see how to step into identity of a quiet warrior, leading and influencing authentically without having to act extroverted. If this conversation resonated with you, the journey doesn't have to end here. Inside the Unsealing Zone, you'll find handouts to help you put these strategies into action, insider circle questions that can go deeper than what we've covered today, and a supportive community to help you practice and grow. See you next time.